Don't be mad. Mom, Jared whispered at the entrance to my coastal hotel lobby. The person standing behind him made the entire room freeze. This wasn't just someone I avoided. This was the one person who knew exactly how to steal everything I'd built with these 58-year-old hands. Tonight, a family reunion is turning my hotel into a boardroom where secrets and power of attorney documents will destroy this family. My name is Margot Hale, at 58. I am the proprietor of the Sandpiper Inn, a place I hammered together from saltwater-soaked studs and sheer force of will here in Briar Harbor, Maine. After losing my husband, this inn became my anchor, my fortress against the ocean's indifference. This weekend was supposed to be a celebration, a milestone 3 solid years since we first opened the doors. I was in the office, running one last check over the reservation list, my finger tracing down the glowing screen to the presidential suite. It was blocked, naturally, reserved for my son, Jared. He's 32. I looked up from the monitor as Diego, my unflappable front desk manager, gripped the receiver at the check-in desk. His back was rigid. He was trying to keep his voice low, but the lobby was quiet, save for the grandfather clock, and I caught the tail end of his forced politeness. Yes, Mrs. Pierce, I understand completely, but that particular suite it is held. I walked over, the heels of my boots clicking quietly on the reclaimed hardwood. He saw me, his eyes wide with apology, and pressed the mute button. Margot, he hissed. It's Savannah. She's demanding I cancel the mother-in-law's reservation, her words to open up 5 rooms for her important family, arriving tonight. I didn't blink. I simply plucked the receiver from his hand and unmuted the line. Savannah. My voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that cuts glass. There was a sharp, surprised inhale on the other end. If you want to discuss my hotel's booking policies, I continued, you can do it in person. My glass conference room. 20 minutes. I didn't wait for a reply. The click of the phone settling back into the cradle was the only sound in the lobby. I turned to Diego. Make a fresh pot of coffee, the dark roast, and lock the schedule for the Seaview conference room for the next 2 hours. He nodded, already moving. He knew this weather. He knew a storm when he saw one. The next 20 minutes were the longest I've endured since the funeral. I stood alone in the conference room, watching the Atlantic churn itself into a cold, grey froth. The waves hit the reinforced glass wall, a rhythm matching the tightening in my chest. For 5 years, I have been the obstacle. 5 years since Jared married Savannah and traded his backbone for her approval. I've been called difficult, overbearing, stuck in the past. But the worst part, the part that hollowed me out, was Jared's silence. He just let it happen. He watched her dismiss me, minimize me, and erase my place in his life, and he said nothing. A silver SUV slid into the private slot by the door, ignoring the valet-only sign. The driver's door opened, and Savannah Pierce emerged, dressed in cream linen that probably cost more than my first month's mortgage payment. She didn't look stressed. She looked entitled. And then the passenger door opened. My son, Jared, unfolded himself from the seat. His shoulders were slumped, his gaze already fixed on the polished floor as they walked through the main doors. The salt air wind followed them in, chilling the warm lobby. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He stepped forward, a human shield for whatever was coming. Don't be mad, Mom, he whispered. I barely heard him. My blood had turned to ice. My breath seized in my lungs. It wasn't Savannah who held my attention. It was the figure standing behind them, emerging from the shadow of the doorway. A woman I hadn't seen in a decade. A woman I had prayed I would never have to see again. Lena Whitmore, my half-sister. The one who had vanished 10 years ago, taking with her the last shred of my trust in family. And she was standing right behind my son. I led them into the Seaview conference room. The dark roast coffee was already waiting on the sideboard, steam rising from the carafe. I took my seat at the head of the long glass table, the turbulent ocean churning just inches behind my back. They sat opposite me, a tribunal of my own making. Savannah, predictably, began. She arranged her features into a mask of patronizing sweetness. Margot, thank you for making time. We know this is a busy weekend for you. She jested vaguely. My family is so excited to be here. They have such a significant social media reach. Having them stay here, in 5 of your best rooms, would be incredible promotion for what you're doing. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting her choice of words, what you're doing, settle in the air like dust. This is the anniversary weekend, I said, my voice flat. I picked up my phone, which I had placed face down on the table. I tapped the screen and read aloud from an email, the date stamp clear. Jared, confirmed. 6 weeks ago. Mum, I wouldn't miss it. Looking forward to celebrating with you at the Sandpiper. Block off the presidential for me. Did I misread that? Jared. My son's eyes darted to the wood grain of the table, his face flushing a dull red. He didn't just know about this plan. He had approved it. He had let her make the call, before he could fail to find an answer. Lena slid her leather briefcase onto the table. It landed with a soft, expensive thud. Margot, let's not start with accusations. Lena's voice was smoother than I remembered, polished by years I knew nothing about. I'm just here to help mediate. Families should be able to sort these things out. The ice in my veins was now a solid block. I turned my full attention to her, ignoring Savannah. Mediate what? Lena? Why are you here? I'm here to work for the family, she said, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. She looked like our father. The thought was a sudden, sharp pain. This is just a little business. Margot. Savannah cut in, her patience for the sweet act clearly gone. My family is offering you free exposure, and you're fighting us over one sweet. A little business. I leaned forward, my hands clasping on the table. This little business was a $2 million leveraged buyout, financed entirely by me after I liquidated my husband's portfolio. It has won the New England Coastal Hospitality Award 2 years running. We operate at a 94% occupancy rate year-round. This inn is not a hobby. Savannah. It is an asset. And it is my asset. The room was silent again, only the sound of the wind rattling the glass. She's right, Lena said. It is an asset, a very valuable one, which is why we need to protect it. From her briefcase, she produced a single document and slid it across the glass. It stopped perfectly in front of me. At the top, in stark black letters, Emergency Financial Power of Attorney. And at the bottom, a digital signature. My signature. My heart didn't pound. It went completely still. I picked up the paper, my movements deliberate. I scanned the metadata, the digital timestamp. My eyes found the date. 6 weeks ago. The day I was discharged from Briar Harbour General. The day my doctor had just set my sprained wrist in a temporary cast after I slipped on the wet kitchen tiles. I remembered being hazy, the painkillers making the edges of the room soft. I remembered Savannah being there, helping me with the discharge forms on a tablet. I was on medication, I said, my voice dangerously low. You brought me a stack of digital forms to sign. You agreed. Margot, Savannah said, her voice rising, shedding its pretense. We all talked about it. You said the inn needed to grow, to restructure the brand. We needed to be able to move quickly. I looked at Jared. He was staring at the wall, a picture of absolute misery. He was not a participant, he was collateral. I reached into my blazer pocket. I pulled out a small, silver digital recorder. I placed it on the glass table between us. It was an innocuous little thing, the kind journalists use. I pressed the small red button. A tiny green light blinked on. Say that again, I said. Say, on the record, that I agreed to sign over financial control of my $2 million asset while I was on prescription narcotics for a post-injury discharge. The green light on the recorder pulsed steadily. Neither Savannah nor Lena spoke. They just stared at the device, then at me, their faces tightening. In that loaded silence, the last 8 years compressed and then unfurled in my mind. I remembered standing in this exact spot when it was just a shell, open to the weather. 8 years ago. I was on my hands and knees, sanding the reclaimed wood for the bar counter until my palms were raw. I was the one who taught myself QuickBooks at 2 a.m, the one who learned digital marketing from online tutorials, the one who navigated the labyrinth of bank loans and supplier invoices, all alone. Jared had been here then, on a weekend visit from college. He'd put his hand on my shoulder, standing in the sawdust. You're building something amazing. Mum, I'll always come home to this. His promise felt as solid as the foundation. Now, it felt like a ghost. After Savannah. Coming home became a duty, then an inconvenience. Our calls shrank. I have a rocking chair on the front porch, the one my husband and I bought on our honeymoon. For the last 2 years, it has been the seat of my frustration. I'd sit there, looking at the ocean, holding the phone to my ear for his 5-minute check-ins, his voice distant, his attention clearly divided. Gotta go. Mum. Savannah needs the car. Click. And Lena. In a box in my attic. I still have the only piece of mail she ever sent me, years after she vanished. It was a holiday card, sent to the wrong address, forwarded to me. Inside, there was no message, no signature. Just a generic printed sentiment. Even her abandonment was careless. That's when I learned to document my life. Not out of paranoia, but because I was the only one willing to keep an accurate record. I installed the security cameras, the good ones. I started keeping detailed call logs. When your reality is constantly being questioned, you learn to save the receipts. My own timeline was sharp and clear. 6 weeks ago, I sent Jared the email invitation for the anniversary, the day of my fall, the day of the signature. 3 weeks ago, a vague text from Jared. Hey, Mom. Might need to reschedule the anniversary thing. Work is crazy. 1 week ago, Savannah called the front desk, not using her married name, to book a Pierce family retreat for this exact weekend. The red flag wasn't just the booking, it was the deposit. Our system requires a hold, and this one was paid, in full, by an anonymous wire. When I traced the routing number, it came back to a shell company, LW Holdings. Lena. The final piece clicked into place this morning, just before I came downstairs. Diego, looking pained, told me Savannah had called the front desk 3 separate times, growing more agitated with each attempt. On the 3rd call, she had offered him a cash tip, her word, if he would just find a glitch and cancel my own reservation. That was the moment. The moment my quiet grief hardened into cold strategy. I would not have an emotional breakdown. I would not yell. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I would build a legal trap and let them walk straight into it. I snapped back to the present. The coffee carafe was still steaming. The recorder was still listening. I flexed my fingers, hidden beneath the soft cotton glove that covered my wrist. The scar from the fall was still tender. The injury they had used as an opportunity. I let the silence from the recorder stretch, the green light blinking in their horrified faces. Then, I pressed the intercom button on the conference phone. Diego, you can send her in now. A moment later, the side door, the one that led to my private office, not the lobby, opened. Tessa Quinn, from Quinn and Alder, my lawyer said, stepping in. She was sharp, precise, and carried a slim leather satchel. She placed it on the table and nodded to me, then fixed her gaze on the other 3. She didn't sit. She preferred to stand. Mrs. Hale retained my services 3 weeks ago. Tessa began, her voice crisp. She pulled a document from her satchel. It was a copy of the power of attorney. I've had a chance to review this document. It's ambitious. Lena shifted, her mask of calm slipping. Savannah just stared. Let's start with the witnessing, Tessa continued, tapping the paper. This document, to be valid, requires 2 impartial witnesses or a notary. You have 2 witnesses listed. Unfortunately, John Smith and Jane Doe are not inspiring confidence, especially when the address listed for both of them traces back to a commercial mail forwarding service in downtown Portland. There was no direct, in-person witnessing of this signature. She then pulled out a second sheet. Which brings us to the signature itself. We ran the metadata on the e-signature file. The digital fingerprint, the unique identifier of the device that authorized the signature, is a perfect match for a desktop computer. And the IP address associated with that authorization, it traces directly to the primary internet service provider account for, she checked her notes, a residence on Willow Creek Drive, your home, Mrs. Pierce. Jared actually recoiled, looking at his wife. You signed it. From our house. It gets better, Tessa said, adding another document to the pile. We also cross-referenced that IP address with your reservation system, Mrs. Hale. In the past 3 weeks, someone using that same IP has accessed the inn's back end, specifically accessing Mr. Jared Hale's accommodation account, attempting to transfer the loyalty points to a new account under the name Pierce. The requests, oddly, were sent from Mr. Hale's own email. Jared looked genuinely bewildered. What, I never did that. Lena finally spoke, her voice strained but attempting indifference. This is all procedural nonsense. It was a temporary authorization, agreed upon by Margot, to allow me to begin restructuring her debt for a better position. She's over-leveraged. Am I asked. Tessa answered for me. That's fascinating. Ms. Whitmore, because we also subpoenaed the records for your entity, LW Holdings, for a financial consultant You seem to be carrying an impressive amount of personal, high-interest credit card debt. Over $100,000, in fact. And this, she placed the final damning document on the table, is a loan application filed 3 days ago to Drummond Bank. You listed the Sandpiper Inn as projected collateral, pending a transfer of management. You weren't trying to restructure my debt. You were trying to use my asset to secure yours. The colour drained from Lena's face. Savannah saw the game was up and immediately tried to save herself. I didn't know about that part. That was her. Lena said this was just business advice, that it would help the brand. I was just following her advice. Were you following her advice this morning? I asked. I picked up the small silver recorder. I pressed play. Savannah's voice, high and impatient, filled the room. Look, I don't care what her name is on. She's the mother-in-law. Just cancel the booking. I will make sure you get a 5-star review, and I'll add let's call it a commission of $200, cash, if you can get it done in the next hour. I pressed stop. The silence was absolute, broken only by a choked sound from my son. Jared put his head in his hands, rubbing his temples. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, and he looked right at me. For the first time, the fog of his marriage seemed to have cleared. My God. Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. I let this happen. The conference room, with its glass walls, suddenly felt like an aquarium. The grey ocean pounded silently against the panes, the pressure building, and it felt like the water was about to burst through and drown us all. Jared lifted his head from his hands. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by a hollow-eyed exhaustion. I turned down the promotion, he said, his voice so quiet I had to lean forward. The one in Boston. It was a partner track. Savannah's head snapped up. Jared, don't. No, he said, shaking his head. She needs to hear this. I turned it down. It was more money, better hours. But Savannah said, she said we couldn't move, that her family was here, that my priority had to be family first, at all costs. She said if I loved her, I wouldn't even consider it. Suddenly, Savannah's composure, the ice-cold shell she had maintained, shattered. It wasn't a dignified cry. It was an ugly, gasping sob that tore out of her. My mother, she choked out, mascara finally running. You don't understand. She looks at me. She looks at us like we're a failure because Jared isn't a vice president yet. Because this inn, she gestured wildly at the room, isn't the Ritz-Carlton. Her sister's son-in-law just bought a house in the Hamptons. I needed a win. I needed something to show her we were smart, that we were powerful. I looked at this weeping woman, who had just tried to leverage my life's work to impress her mother, and I felt nothing. No pity. No empathy. I just saw the pathetic, toxic cycle of expectations. A snake eating its own tail. She was willing to destroy my future to secure her present. So you were bankrupt, I said, turning my gaze to the one person in the room who was truly dangerous. Lena, who had been observing Savannah's breakdown with clinical detachment, flinched. For the first time, her voice, when it came, was not smooth. It was brittle. Not technically, not yet. It's a rotation problem. Cash flow. I just needed collateral. I needed an asset that was clean to pivot my funds. It was temporary. You needed my in, I stated. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, surfaced. Me, age 12, standing on a porch I didn't recognize. My father, smelling of aftershave and lies, introducing me to a little girl with his same eyes. Lena, his secret. The crack in our family's foundation. The reason my mother turned to ice. I remembered Lena, 10 years ago, right before she vanished. She'd shown up at my old house, asking for money. Just to get back on my feet. Margot, I swear. I gave it to her. She was gone the next day. It wasn't the theft that stung. It was the cowardice. Tessa, my lawyer, had been watching this all unfold. She was a surgeon looking for the entry point. She found it. She turned to my son. Mr. Hale, she asked, her tone neutral. Why did your wife have the password to your personal email? The one you used to confirm your stay with your mother? Jared looked confused, as if the question didn't make sense. What, she's my wife? I thought. I thought marriage meant no secrets. I couldn't stay silent. I looked at my son, the boy I raised, the man he had become. No secrets doesn't mean no boundaries. Jared, you don't burn down your own house just to prove you have nothing to hide. The storm outside was picking up. The light in the room had dimmed, and the overhead potlights threw harsh shadows on their faces. I glanced at the reflection in the glass wall. I saw myself, flanked by the churning, angry sea. I saw them Savannah, ruined and hollow. Jared, broken. Lena, a cornered animal. We were a grotesque portrait of a family, distorted by our own reflections. I pushed my chair back, the sound scraping loudly in the quiet room. This isn't a reconciliation, I said, my voice final. This isn't a family meeting. This is an inventory of the truth, and we are not finished. Tessa held up a hand, a signal for silence. This room is soundproof, but I'd like the next part to be perfectly clear. She tapped the intercom. Diego, the logs, please. As if he had been waiting by the door, Diego entered immediately. He was all business. He placed a single, stapled sheaf of papers in front of Tessa, his eyes fixed on me, not on the others. He gave a sharp nod and was gone. Hotel switchboard logs, Tessa announced, her voice amplifying the clinical nature of the printout. As we heard, 3 calls from Savannah Pierce's cell phone, all attempting to cancel the presidential suite. She then turned her sharp, assessing gaze to Lena. But there was a 4th call, Ms. Whitmore. Yesterday afternoon, a 30-second inquiry about Mrs. Hale's personal schedule, originating from a prepaid SIM, a number that, when cross-referenced, is the primary contact for your LW Holdings application. You were tracking me, I said. It wasn't a question. Lena waved a dismissive hand, but a fine tremor had started in her fingers. Just coordination. Let's call it conspiracy, Tessa countered. She turned her laptop, which she had quietly set up, to face Savannah. This, Mrs. Pierce, is your Venmo transaction history. Publicly filterable, by the way. You might want to fix that. On the screen, dated 1 day before the first call to Diego, was a payment. $2,000, sent from Savannah to LW Holdings. The memo line contained one word, consulting. Jared made a strangled noise. You paid her. You paid her to do this. She was helping us. Savannah cried, her voice cracking. She was helping our family. She was helping herself, Tessa said, swiping to the next image. It was a grainy black and white still, date stamped, from a Ring camera. This is the service entrance for the office building in Portland that houses the mail forwarding service you used for your fake witnesses, Ms. Whitmore. That is your personal assistant. And that, she pointed to the man in the security uniform, is the building's night guard. She is handing him an envelope. This was taken 1 hour before your emergency power of attorney was digitally notarized from that same building, long after the notary's office had closed for the day. And then there's the signature itself, I said, my voice quiet. I picked up the document from the table. It's a very good forgery. Lena, you always were the artistic one, but you missed a detail. I placed my right hand, the one in the soft cotton glove, flat on the glass. I am right-handed. I have been my entire life. I write with this hand. I sign checks with this hand. I built my inn with this hand. I tapped the signature on the page. The pen stroke, the pressure, the slight clockwise tilt. That is a left-handed signature. I looked at my half-sister. You always did everything with your left hand. Lena was a statue. Tessa didn't let the moment rest. We also executed a digital recovery on Mrs. Pierce's cloud account, which was, incidentally, linked to her husband's. She read from her notes. A draft email, addressed to a local PR firm, dated 2 weeks ago. Subject rebranding the Sandpiper. We are moving forward with the restructure, but we have a slight PR obstacle. The current owner, my mother-in-law, is sentimental. We need a strategy to manage her narrative as we transition the brand. A PR obstacle, I repeated. The word felt like swallowing rocks. That's what I am. No, Mom, that's not, Jared began, but his protest was cut off. His own phone, face up on the table, vibrated and lit up. A text message. He glanced at it, and his face, already pale, went chalk white. What is it? Jared, I asked. He looked at his wife, his eyes filled with a new, cold horror. He read the text aloud, his voice hollow. It's from Melissa, Savannah's mother. We are almost there. Don't let her ruin this weekend for us. Get those rooms. Fix this. He dropped the phone as if it had burned him. Fix this, he repeated, the words tasting like ash. You see, Lena said, her voice suddenly regaining its oily confidence. The plan was sound. We book the 5 rooms. We arrive. By the time Margot realizes what's happening, we're already here. It's a fait accompli. The new management structure is in place. The family is here to celebrate the transition. The investors are happy. The investors at Drummond Bank? Tessa asked, sliding the final piece of paper onto the table. It was the loan application. The one that lists the Sandpiper Inn as seizable property. That was the word. Seizable. It broke the spell. Savannah, realizing she had been a pawn in a much larger, dirtier game, spun on Lena. You said it was a simple restructuring. You said it was to help me, to help Jared. You told me this was legal, seizable. You were going to let them take her in. I was going to save myself. Lena screamed, shoving her chair back as she stood. You wanted to play with the big girls. Savannah, this is what it costs. Sit down, I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it was the voice that had built this hotel. They both froze, their argument cut short. The sudden silence was deafening. I stood up. I walked to the heavy glass door of the conference room and pressed the electronic lock. The thunk of the magnetic bolt sliding into place echoed in the room. They all stared at me, their escape route now visibly, audibly, closed. "We're not finished," I said. "You're right. Lena, the plan was sound," I said, my voice resonating in the locked room. "Except for one detail. You were trying to steal something that was no longer mine to give." Tessa stepped forward, opening her satchel again. She removed a thick, binder-clipped document and placed it on the table with a heavy, definitive sound. "This," she said, "is the Sea Glass Trust, formed 6 months ago. The Sandpiper Inn, its grounds, and all its associated accounts were transferred into this irrevocable trust at that time." Lena's eyes narrowed, searching for the loophole. A trust can be managed. A trustee can be influenced. Not this one, I said. "You see, that's the part that cost me my wrist. I was in the attic 6 weeks ago, pulling down the original corporate ledgers to finalize the asset transfer, when I slipped. The transfer was already complete. The signature you got from me was meaningless before I even signed it." Tessa tapped the front page of the binder. "The Sea Glass Trust has a very specific protective covenant. No asset, loan, or line of credit can be leveraged against the trust, nor can its core ownership be transferred, without 3 in-person, wet ink signatures." She held up one finger. "Mrs. Margot Hale as the primary beneficiary." A second finger. "Myself, Tessa Quinn, as the trust's legal counsel." She paused and looked toward the door. "And our third signatory, empowered as a financial stop-loss in his own employment contract. Diego," I finished for her, "whose contract gives him the authority to flag and freeze any external booking attempt he deems a hostile financial intervention. Like, for instance, a $2,000 consulting fee from a shell company to book 5 rooms." Savannah looked like she was going to be sick. "But we aren't just protected legally," I continued, walking over to the sideboard and picking up my phone. "You were worried about managing my narrative. Savannah, you should have checked to see if I already had one." I held up the phone. It was open to an email draft. "This is a story pitch, ready to go, for Coastal Living magazine, the one you have in your lobby. It's an exclusive From Widowhood to Waterfront, the story of the Sandpiper Inn. It's a very sympathetic story. A story about a woman building a legacy. A story that would make any attempt to restructure her look exactly like what it is, a predatory attack. That draft is already in the hands of a reporter. All it needs is my go signal." Lena's face was white. This, she understood. Public opinion. I put the phone down and picked up the conference room receiver. I dialed a number from memory and put it on speaker. "Northwick County Inspector's Office, Fraud Division." A gruff voice answered. "Inspector," I said, my voice clear and steady. "This is Margot Hale at the Sandpiper Inn. I'm calling to report a case of attempted power of attorney fraud, fraudulent notarization, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." "Yes, I have the names." Lena lunged for the phone, but I held up a hand. "I'll hold for an officer to take my statement," I said into the receiver, and then I muted the call, as if on cue. Tessa's phone buzzed. She looked at it. "Well, this saves us some time. That was Drummond Bank. They're confirming what I already knew. Your loan application, Ms. Whitmore, was officially rejected an hour ago. The bank flagged the asset my client's in as encumbered by a non-negotiable trust. They've also flagged LW Holdings for review." I walked to the coffee carafe and switched it off. The small warming light went dark. "And finally," I said, looking at Jared, who hadn't moved. As of 10 minutes ago, the inn's entire financial system has been updated. All management-level access, including the vendor and booking portals, now requires a two-factor authentication key. A key which is, at this moment, being physically delivered to Diego. You and Savannah are locked out. Not as punishment, Jared, as policy. Tessa placed a final, single sheet of paper in the center of the table. "This is a settlement offer," she said. "In exchange for Mrs. Hale not pursuing a civil case for damages, legal fees, and emotional distress, you will both sign this. It's a permanent non-interference agreement. You will never contact the inn's suppliers, bank, or staff. You will never set foot on this property without Mrs. Hale's written invitation. And you will jointly reimburse Quinn and Alder for all fees associated with this inventory." Savannah stared at the paper, her hands shaking. "My mother. She's on her way here. She'll be here any minute." Lena just laughed, a short, ugly sound. "A trust? You've been busy?" I looked at the three of them. These people who had so profoundly underestimated me. "Did you really think," I said, my voice soft, "that I came here empty-handed?" I was still holding the muted receiver when the main lobby doors slid open, admitting a blast of cold air and a flurry of noise. It wasn't just one person. It was an entourage. Savannah, who had been staring at the settlement agreement, looked up at the glass wall of the conference room, her eyes wide with a new, more immediate terror. "Oh, no, she's here. That's my mother." At the center of the arriving group, which was already treating the lobby like a conquered territory, was a woman in a fur-trimmed coat, Melissa Pierce. She clapped her hands, a sharp, commanding sound that cut through the inn's quiet atmosphere. "Hello, service. We need check-in." She strode to the front desk, not even looking at Diego, who stood his ground. "I am Melissa Pierce," she announced, as if the name itself should unlock every door. "My daughter, Savannah, booked a family retreat. 5 rooms, I believe. We'll need them adjoining. Ocean view." I pressed the button to unlock the conference room door. The thwack of the magnetic lock releasing made everyone jump. "Well," I said, "it seems our inventory is over. It's time for customer service." I stepped out into the lobby. The air was thick with tension. My son, my lawyer, my half-sister, and my daughter-in-law followed me out. A strange, silent procession. "Melissa," Savannah said, her voice thin. "Savannah, darling." Finally, Melissa turned, and her eyes, the same cold blue as her daughter's, swept over me. She dismissed me in an instant. "This lobby is quaint. Your sister Evelyn's resort in Palm Beach had the most stunning marble. This woodwork is so dark." "There has been a mistake with your booking," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through her assessment. "There are no rooms. We are 100% occupied for the anniversary weekend." Melissa's smile was a thin, bloodless line. "I'm sure you can find them. Perhaps you can move. Whoever is in the presidential suite." "I'm afraid that's not possible," I said. "The Harbour Light Lodge, just north of town, has several vacancies. I highly recommend them." Melissa laughed, a sound like ice cubes rattling in a glass. She turned to Savannah, who was standing frozen between her mother's entitlement and the glass-walled room full of evidence. "You told me you had handled this. You told me you had influence here." She then fixed her gaze on Jared. The look she gave him was one of pure, unadulterated contempt. Jared, stop letting your mother be difficult. Handle this. It was the command, the final push, the expectation that he would, as always, fold. And Jared, my son, who had been silent for 5 years, stepped forward. He didn't just step in front of me. He stepped in front of his wife. No, he said. His voice wasn't just firm. It was loud. It was a sound I had not heard since he was a teenager. The lobby, which had been buzzing with the Pierce family's whispers and the checking in of 2 other guests, went dead silent. "This is my mother's hotel," Jared said, his voice ringing in the sudden quiet. "This is her property, and no one is touching it. We are not staying. You are not staying. We are leaving." The other guests at the desk, a quiet couple, stopped signing their forms. Diego's face was a mask of perfect, neutral professionalism. The social pressure, the weapon Savannah and her mother lived by, had just turned on them. Lena, seeing her leverage with Jared gone, made a final, desperate play. She hurried to Melissa's side. "Melissa," she whispered, just loud enough for us to hear. "Don't worry. I have her power of attorney. This whole place is under our control." Melissa's eyes lit up with triumph. "Is that so?" I looked at her, and I almost smiled. "You're right," I said. "We should finish this. But I think everyone should be clear on the terms." I took the small silver recorder from my pocket. I didn't need the conference room speakers. I held it up, and I pressed play. Savannah's voice, high and reedy, filled the pristine lobby. "I will make sure you get a 5-star review, and I'll add let's call it a commission, of $200, cash, if you can get it done in the next hour." The sound was shockingly clear. The quiet couple at the desk stared, their pens frozen. The Pierce family members looked at each other, their arrogance shattering. Savannah's bribe, her $200 betrayal, hung in the air over the reclaimed wood bar. Melissa Pierce went rigid. The public humiliation was a more effective weapon than any legal document. She understood this battlefield. She knew, instantly, that she had lost. She gave me a look of such profound hatred, I knew this was far from over. "We will discuss this," she hissed. She turned, her fur coat sweeping, and motioned for her family. "We are leaving." "Not all of us," I said. Melissa froze. I looked at Savannah, at Lena, at Jared, and at Tessa. "She's right. We need to discuss this." I gestured, not to the door, but back to the glass-walled room. "Privately, let's go finish signing the paperwork." We filed back into the glass room. I didn't lock the door this time. There was nowhere for them to run. We all took our seats, not as family, but as opposing sides in a deposition that had already concluded. Tessa's phone, sitting on the glass, buzzed once, a flat, insistent sound. She read the screen, her expression professional, unmoved. "That was my partner," she said to the room. "He has just spoken with the Northwick County District Attorney's Office. They are actively considering a petition for a warrant to search all computers at your home, Mrs. Pierce, and at your office, Ms. Whitmore." Savannah made a small, strangled sound, but it was Lena who reacted. She was a cornered animal, and she had one move left to wound. She leaned across the table, her eyes burning with a lifetime of perceived slights. "You'd do it, wouldn't you?" she hissed at me. "You'd send police to my office, to your son's house. Our father was right about you. He always said you were cold, that you were just like your mother, all ice and business. You'd burn your own family, your own blood, just to prove you're right. The air was still. The old wound, the one our father had carved into me, throbbed. I looked at my half-sister, at the wreckage she had made. Blood, I said, my voice quiet but harder than the glass table, is not a license to steal. Lena, you've been hiding behind him your whole life. It's over. My words, the finality of them, seemed to hit Savannah harder than the threat of a warrant. She looked at Lena, her eyes wide with a slow dawning, sickening clarity. My house, she whispered. My computers. She turned on Lena, her voice a shredded whisper. You were just using me. You didn't care about my mother, or the brand. You were just drowning. You were drowning in debt. And you tied yourself to me. I was just your pawn. You wanted to win, Lena snapped, her mask of control gone. I gave you a way to win. No, a voice said. Jared. He stood up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his key ring. He slid it across the table. The metal keys skittered to a halt right in front of Savannah. I'm sleeping at the Harbour Light Lodge tonight, he said. His voice was flat, empty. I'm not coming home. I need boundaries. This. He gestured to all of them, to the table, to the mess. Is not marriage. This is something else. And I'm done. As if summoned by the drama, the conference room phone rang, an external line. Tessa, closest to it, answered and hit the speaker button. Tessa Quinn! You, a voice screeched, so loud it distorted. Melissa Pierce. You haven't heard the last of this. I am calling my lawyer. We are suing for slander, for coercion, for emotional distress. We will take this glorified shack apart. We will own you. Tessa didn't raise her voice. Melissa, she said calmly, since you've announced your intention to litigate, I must advise you to stop speaking. However, for your education, under Maine state law, truth is an absolute defense against slander. And this phone call, in which you are attempting to threaten me and my client to stop a legal process, could be considered coercion under Title 17. We'll be happy to add it to our file for the DA. She hung up, plunging the room back into silence. A different phone buzzed. Mine. The internal line from the front desk. I put it on speaker. Yes, Diego. Mrs. Hale. His voice was pure professionalism. You should be aware. The lobby recording seems to have been disseminated. It appears to be circulating in the Pierce family group chat. The family members who left with Mrs. Pierce are apparently turning on her. Publicly. It's a very active discussion. That was it. The final domino. Lena looked at the warrant threat. She looked at the failed lawsuit. She looked at the public implosion of her allies. Her shoulders slumped. I'll sign, she said, her voice dead. I'll sign the settlement. She tried one last time to bargain. But it stays private. No media, no coastal living. You bury this. Margot. Before I could even respond, Savannah, sobbing, reached for the pen. She just wanted the bleeding to stop. She was pulling the signature page toward her when the conference phone rang again. A different number. External. Tessa answered. Tessa Quinn. She listened. Her posture straightened. Yes, she is. I am her counsel. She listened again, her eyes lifting to meet mine. "We will be in the lobby in 2 minutes." She hung up. "What now?" Jared asked. "Was that my mother again?" Savannah whispered. "No," Tessa said, her voice grave. "That was the front desk, routing a call from the Northwick County Sheriff's Department. 2 officers are on their way to the lobby. They will be here in less than 5 minutes. But we're signing," Savannah shrieked. "Call them back. Tell them we're settling." "That won't matter," Tessa said, her gaze fixed on Lena. "That call was not in response to my report to the inspector. That was an independent fraud alert, filed 1 hour ago, directly by the corporate legal department at Drummond Bank." The air left the room. The bank. The bank had called the police. All of them. Jared, Savannah, Lena. Even Tessa turned their eyes to me. They were waiting for me to fix it, to stop it, to show mercy, to do something. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just lifted my hand, the one still covered by the soft glove, and placed it on the back of my neck. I took one. Long, slow breath. Listening. Waiting for the sound of the lobby doors. The lobby doors slid open. This time, it wasn't family. 2 uniformed officers from the Northwick County Sheriff's Department stepped inside. They were calm, professional, their presence instantly silencing the main hall. They scanned the room, their eyes passing over the wreckage of the Pierce family, and settled on our group by the conference room. One officer stepped forward, addressing Tessa. "We're here following a fraud alert from Drummond Bank. We're looking for a Ms. Lena Whitmore." "I am Ms. Whitmore," Lena said, her voice thin. The officer nodded, not unkindly. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside with us. You are being detained on suspicion of forging a public document and attempted conspiracy to commit financial fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As the officer's voice droned on, reading Lena her rights, Savannah, who was still seated, looked past them. Through the main glass doors, she could see her mother, Melissa, standing by her silver SUV, her phone to her ear. Their eyes met. Savannah's gaze was a desperate, silent plea. Melissa looked at her daughter, at the police, at the shattered remnants of her ambition. Then, with a cold, deliberate finality, Melissa Pierce turned her back, got into the car, and was gone. She had abandoned her. The betrayal was absolute, a final severing. Jared, who had watched the entire exchange, stepped forward, placing himself between me and the officers. "Officers," he said, his voice clear. "My mother, Mrs. Hale, is the victim here. I am her son, Jared Hale, my wife and Ms. Whitmore. They had access to my devices. I am willing to provide you with all my passwords, my laptop, my phone. Whatever you need to prove my mother's case." Tessa stepped up, holding the thick, binder-clipped sea-glass trust. She didn't give it to the officer. She showed him the cover page. "Officer," she said, "I am Tessa Quinn, Mrs. Hale's counsel. This is the trust that owns this property. It is irrevocable and legally ironclad. It confirms her sole authority and blocks any and all attempts at seizure, including the fraudulent one filed by Ms. Whitmore." The officer nodded, his eyes scanning the first page. "Understood, ma'am. This is now a state matter." The second officer was placing handcuffs on Lena's wrists. She didn't resist. As they turned her to leave, she paused just long enough to lock eyes with me. "You always did know just the right time to strike, didn't you, Margot?" she whispered, her voice laced with a strange, bitter admiration. I don't pick the time. Lena, I replied, my voice just as quiet. I just pick the truth. They led her away. In the conference room, Savannah was shaking. Her face was a ruin of tears and makeup. She looked at the settlement agreement, the pen still lying beside it. Slowly, her hand trembling so violently she could barely hold the pen. She grabbed it. She signed her name, a spidery, broken signature. I'll sign it. She wept, the words tearing out of her. I'll sign it all. I'll get therapy. I'll get help. From the lobby, a phone rang, high-pitched and frantic. It was Melissa's, still visible through the glass before her car had pulled away. Her furious, muffled voice suddenly became a shriek. What do you mean? Cancelled. Cancelled. That sponsorship was for $500,000. What recording? What do you mean? What recording? The car door slammed, silencing her. Jared turned to me. The room felt cavernous, empty. He looked at the floor, then raised his eyes to mine. The shame was there, but so was something else, a flicker of the boy I'd raised. Mom, he said, his voice rough. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Not today. I don't deserve that. I'm just asking for a chance to build new boundaries, the right way, one day at a time. If you'll let me. I held his gaze. I gave him a single, slow nod. I turned and walked to the glass doors of the conference room and pushed them open. The sound of the real ocean, the one that had been my soundtrack for 8 years, rushed in, a clean, cold sound that smelled of salt and evening. I looked at Diego, who was standing by the desk, his face a perfect mask of calm. I gave him a small nod, a signal. He nodded back, and a moment later, the warm, amber lights of the bar and the entryway lamps switched on, making the lobby glow. The conference room door slid shut behind me. I heard the click of the officer's heels on the pavement outside. I walked to my front desk, the center of my world. I picked up the small, polished brass sign. I placed it squarely in the center of the counter, its letters facing the door, facing the storm, facing the rest of the night. It read, "No vacancy." I blinked, my gaze calm. The battle was over. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's connect and share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary and like this video. If you want to support us even more, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.